Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Please note, the September 13th, 2021 Advisory Redistricting Commission will be conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. The meeting will be held via teleconference, and commissioners and the public will participate via teleconference. Those locations are not listed on the agenda and are not accessible to the public. The public is encouraged to listen to the Advisory Redistricting Commission meeting live on Woodland TV Channel 20, and also be going to the City of Woodland website at www.cityofwoodland.org/meetings. If you wish to make a comment during general public comment or on a specific agenda item, there are 3 ways to do that. 1, join the Zoom Advisory Redistricting Commission meeting remotely by either logging onto the Zoom link located on the meeting agenda. Please make sure to download the app to your computer or mobile device and enter the meeting ID, or by calling a listed number and enter the meeting ID. 2, leave a voicemail message at 530-661-5900. Make sure to press option 1. All voicemail messages received by 6 p.m. will be played during the commission meeting and read into the record at appropriate time. 3, if you are watching the live stream and wish to make a comment on an item as it is being heard, you may submit an email to the city clerk at councilmeetings@cityofwoodland.org prior to public comment on that item. Email comments submitted to be read into record shall be no more than 3 minutes when read aloud. Please include the agenda item in the subject line. Okay. That being said, Madam Clerk, would you please call roll call?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you. Bernardi?
Here.
East?
Yes.
Kimball?
Here.
Moreno?
Here.
Simas?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That moves us on to item C, communications with opening the floor, the public comment portion. Do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
I don't have any emails and nobody is raising their hand.
Good. Okay. I assume that'll change later on. Moving on to item D, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay. So first motion by Member East, second by Member Kimball. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me,
All those,
Chair, would you like me to take the vote?
please.
Bernardi?
Yes.
East?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Moreno?
Yes.
Simas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. That moves us on to item E, public input and outreach process.
Thank you. So I can go ahead and give a brief presentation. Can everyone see the PowerPoint on the screen?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so at the last redistricting commission meeting, commissioners asked for more information on public input and outreach process for the redistricting. And so I have a PowerPoint with about 7 slides here to go over in a little more detail about some of the outreach requirements. And as our city attorney, Ethan Walsh, I think he briefly touched on the public hearing requirements, and we must by law hold 4 public hearings. The that enable community members to provide input on drawing the district maps. And one hearing must occur before the city draws the draft maps. At least 2 hearings must happen after the drawing of the maps. And the 4th hearing can happen either before or after the drawing of the maps. One of the other things was to increase the accessibility of these hearings. The cities must take the following steps. At least 1 hearing must occur on a Saturday, Sunday, or after 6 p.m. on a weekday. If a redistricting hearing is consolidated with another local government meeting, like a council meeting, the redistricting hearing portion must begin at a pre-designated time. So if the public hearing is scheduled at 7, and if staff is on an agenda item at 7, they are allowed to finish that item and complete it, and then immediately the public hearing must start. And then also the local public redistricting hearing should be made accessible to people with disabilities. Some outreach information that I have is, in order to engage the underrepresented and the non-English speaking communities in the process, cities must make a good faith effort to do the following, and that's to share information about the local redistricting process with media organizations that cover the news in the jurisdiction, including media organizations that reach language minority communities, or share information via good government, civil rights, civic engagement, and community groups, organizations that are active in jurisdictions, and including groups that are actively involved in language minority communities. And amongst the community groups and organizations, of course, are nonprofits. And members for public feedback, members of the public must be allowed to submit testimony and draft maps electronically or via writing. And to ensure transparency, the date, time, and location of any of the public redistricting hearings or workshops should be noticed on the internet at least 5 days in advance. And then they can be published online at least 3 days in advance if there are fewer than 28 days before the deadline to adopt the maps. And the draft maps must be published on the internet at least 7 days before adoption. Although again, the draft map may be published online at least 3 days in advance if again there are fewer than 28 days before the deadline to adopt the maps. One of the things to take into account is that each draft map prepared by the city must be accompanied by the following information: the total population, the citizen voting age population, which we call the CVAP, and racial and ethnic characteristics of the citizen voting age population of each proposed district. The recordings, the city must provide an audio or audiovisual recording or a written summary of the public comment and the council deliberations at all public redistricting hearings or workshops. The recording or written summary must be made available within 2 weeks after the public hearing or the workshop. And cities should also create a dedicated redistricting webpage and maintain it for at least 10 years following the adoption of the new district boundaries. And the webpage should include an explanation of the redistricting process for that jurisdiction in English and applicable languages. I do want to briefly touch on applicable languages. So the Secretary of State on their website, they have a document that's called Language Requirements for City Redistricting, and it's dated June 11th, 2021. And they list every city in California with the language requirement, the applicable language requirement. And I looked up Woodland and they have not applicable. But I'm still, even though it's not applicable that we have anything in Spanish, I'm still translating information and putting up the information in Spanish because I think it's only appropriate given the Hispanic population in Woodland, although it doesn't meet the criteria for the Secretary of State. And the criteria for Secretary of State is any language that is spoken by a group of city residents with limited English proficiency who constitute 3% or more of the city's total population over 4 years of age, or whom language can be determined. So it didn't meet the Secretary of State criteria, but I'm still putting up information in Spanish. The next bullet is procedures for a member of the public to offer verbal testimony during a public hearing or submit written testimony directly to the governing body in English and applicable languages. A calendar that lists the dates of all public redistricting hearings and workshops, the notice and agenda for each public hearing and workshop, either the recording or written summary of each public hearing and the workshop, each draft map that the city considers at public hearings, and the final adopted district map of the city. Those are all the requirements for what should be on the website and should stay there for 10 years. And then I have some best practices for local redistricting and how to build public awareness through a more robust and translated outreach. And that's by creating outreach and publicity materials and distribute through a variety of channels. Ensure outreach and public materials are distributed in multiple languages, and actively promote local redistricting via social media and local influencers. Maximizing public participation through frequent and accessible hearings and workshops. What the commission can do is hold more hearings than the legal minimum, hold hearings in diverse locations throughout the city, offer the public diverse hearings days and times, create standalone redistricting hearings, not in conjunction with city council, live stream and record all hearings and post on the redistricting webpage, host numerous workshops to inform the public and gather community of interest testimony, and then offer technical support to help residents submit district maps. And that's all I have on the outreach process, but I wanted to go over the last 2 slides that I have, and those give some information on communities of interest. And I wanted to do that because if you looked in your packet, Danny Hewitt came up with a paper map that the public could submit. And when I researched some of the different cities throughout California, I looked at some of the community of interest forms that they have, and I kind of took the information from one of them and made that the second page behind the map. And so if you're wondering what communities of interest are, they're during the redistricting, a local government should aim to keep neighborhoods and communities of interest intact with a single city council district. Communities of interest are the overlapping sets of neighborhoods, networks, and groups that share interests, views, cultures, histories, languages, and values, and whose boundaries can be identified on a map. Relationships with political parties or elected officials and candidates are not considered communities of interest. And some of the elements that help define communities of interest are shared interest in schools, housing, community safety, transit, health conditions, land use, environmental conditions, and or other issues. Common social and civic networks, including churches, mosques, temples, homeowner associations, and community centers, and shared use of community spaces like parks and shopping centers. Racial and ethnic compositions, cultural identities, and households that predominantly speak a language other than English. And similar social economic status, including but not limited to income, home ownership, and education levels. Shared political boundary lines from other jurisdictions, such as school districts, community college districts, and water districts. And while local governing bodies likely know many of the communities of interest in their jurisdictions, there will inevitably be some communities that they do not know well and some that they do not know at all. A holistic picture of the communities of interest in any city takes shape only through extensive public testimony from a diverse set of community members. And that's all the information I have. Does anybody have any questions?
have a question. So have these communities of interest been mapped before, like in a previous time where the first time you did the districting work, or has there been anything since then to help from a benchmark?
No, some of these requirements are actually new. And I don't remember that we did the communities of interest last time when we did this in 2013.
That's surprising.
So Anna, when we set up districts originally, how were the districts determined?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm trying to let me close my PowerPoint because I don't see anyone here. I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay. So when I was involved last time, we had a gentleman from county elections. His name is Tom Stanionis. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but he worked in the elections office, and he was the one that drew the maps for the commission at that time. So he attended every meeting. The commission let Tom know what they were looking for in the map. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he came up with 3 maps that the commission chose, and then took either 1 or 2 of those to the city council.
But what was that based on? I mean, elections don't tell us much about communities of interest, or I guess I'm still a little confused with how that was. I mean, if we're not using political party or anything like that, that seems to be one of the things you'd get from an elections official. So I'm just wondering what information was there to help make the decision from him.
So I'm trying to remember what was given. So the section here in so it's on the ensuring transparency, where it says each draft map prepared by the city must be accompanied by the following information: the total population, citizen voting age population, the CVAP, and racial and ethnic characteristics of the citizen voting age population of each proposed district. And at that time, they were really focusing, or they were focusing on the Hispanic population. So I'm not very prepared to show anything. I don't have anything from 2013 as an example to show you, but.
So Anna, I know I wasn't involved in that process, but maybe I can add to it a little bit. So I think when you establish the districts back at the initial stage with the individual from the county, I mean, I think the kind of the paramount focus and the first thing that is most important is to kind of evaluate the new population numbers and make sure that there's a consistency in terms of population, and that the boundaries are kind of coherent, like what we talked about last meeting, where you aren't dividing them up or separating areas or whatever. But as part of that, when you're evaluating where the boundaries should go, one of the key things that you do have to consider is these communities of interest, and kind of, I think part of your role would be to have a discussion on kind of what we believe in Woodland are those communities of interest. And as we're developing lines, think about, how can we avoid breaking those up? You wouldn't want to split a specific community of interest based on that. And that is a new requirement. And so it's not something that they probably went through in the last go round, but it's something to be conscious of, because that's one of the key things. If there's kind of a section of the city that we believe have kind of consistent voting interests potentially. I mean, just one of the most obvious examples in Woodland, and I don't know that we're going to be able to avoid breaking it up just because of the growth in town, but Spring Lake has different interests than the older parts of the city. And I think in the past, when they developed when they developed the original boundaries, I think that was something they were thinking of because they have kind of unique concerns and unique interests in terms of what they're thinking about and their priorities and the like. And so that's just one example. And it may be so big now that it's not something that we can avoid breaking up. But it's examples like that. And I'm sure there's lots of other communities of interest that you could think about and think, well, we wouldn't want to break this neighborhood up. We wouldn't want to break that neighborhood up. So that's kind of one of the key things that we're going to have to think about as you're developing a recommendation to the city council.
Can I just make a comment? Given this discussion, one of my comments when I was reviewing the questionnaire that you put together, Anna, which I thought was really great for getting input, it struck me that possibly there could be another paragraph put in that talks about, the priorities that we are required to follow, because the first priority is the population being equal, and that's going to override all the other priorities, as I understand it. Ethan. And so I think when someone's filling out that form in terms of their community of interest, it's important that they're grounded in those higher priorities that we will need to follow so they don't get confused and have expectations that can't be met.
Okay. Thank you, Peggy.
I agree with Member Bernardi there, Peggy. So is that something that we can do to the form, that we include kind of the requirements or a little bit more detail before we upload this to the city website?
Yes. This is pretty much just a draft for you to review and make any changes.
Okay.
So I think a couple things that probably would be helpful to get some input on as we're moving forward on this is one, things like the comment that Peggy just made are really helpful in terms of outreach materials that you think would be helpful, or that you have ideas of what the city could provide that will, help get input from people in town. And then secondly, to get some input on kind of, on a outline kind of the minimum that we have to do in terms of outreach, and then also some suggested best practices that the Secretary of State and League of California, League of Women Voters recommend in terms of doing outreach, but to get kind of more concrete suggestions from you all as to what you think would be good outreach events or outreach ideas for Woodland specifically. I think that would be helpful. And we obviously as staff have to do some of that on our own, but it would be beneficial, I think, from the committee to get that kind of input.
Member East, do you have your hand up? Do you have a question?
Oops.
I think we lost her. You're muted. Did you have a question, Nan?
I do. I'm sorry. On the form, it has name of community member or an organization and phone and email. Are those required or are those optional?
I don't know that they're required. Maybe optional. I don't know, Ethan. Do you?
It wouldn't be required. I mean, I think that's helpful information to have, but it's just like when people give public comment, they're never obligated to give their name or personal information if they don't want to. So, I mean, we could state that if we want. I think usually people, I do think it's helpful information to have, though, just, so that you're aware of people who are actually live in town and that type of thing.
And you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, could we make it optional?
Yes, I can put optional next to that.
Right.
I support that.
People
So maybe I'm missing something here, but the survey. So was there a plan for the survey? Did we talk about this at the last meeting and I'm just forgetting, which is very possible? So sorry, I feel like we're jumping to something that I'm not sure what is the scope of the plan or potential plan. And to your point about feedback, I'm having a hard time giving feedback when I'm not really sure what what is currently set up and what you're, what you're asking for here. So I feel like we're jumping around a little bit, and it would be helpful to understand what the thoughts are with regards to this survey.
I'm sorry. I would also like to know what materials do we need to have in place before we put this up? I mean, is there a PowerPoint that we need to develop for people to go through and understand what redistricting is? And then at the end, and just a whole introduction type thing? Or do we just put this up?
So Ethan, I was going to ask, is this what a workshop would be for? Where we would gather all this information and hand out the community of interest and explain to people the process?
So a workshop would typically be where you would provide people with information on what the redistricting process looks like, what the process is, what the priorities are in setting up the various districts, and then ask them for input on both, kind of where they see that the line should be drawn and where they see that particular communities of interest are and groups that shouldn't be split up. So that would be the type of thing that you would do at a redistricting workshop. So you give people the information that they need to make the types of decisions that they, that we need input on, that this committee needs input on to make a recommendation to the council. You would have that type of information available for them to provide you input, and then potentially have some discussion and some kind of a roundtable discussion. There's some question as to what that's going to look like. If we do have to do it on Zoom, it would be much better if we could do it in person, because people would be more comfortable interacting, I think, in that context. But that is the type of thing that would happen at a redistricting workshop. So what we would have to do is we would have to develop materials that would provide that information to people, and then a structure so that we could get feedback from the group, from whoever attends on that process.
It sounds to me like if it wasn't, the public didn't have input in the last, or setting up the original districting, that we need to educate the community on what redistricting is and why we need their input, why it's important for them to participate.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess I too had asked at the last meeting if we could see what other communities are doing. I understand that what was presented was what's legal and what we're required to do. But I think it would also be helpful if there's been other communities, especially locally within the Sacramento region, that have done this already. I always like to look at what other examples are, and there's no reason to recreate the wheel, at least with a structure. So I had been hoping that was some of what we were going to be looking at tonight, is kind of a sense of what other other communities have done, and some kind of recommendations. Obviously, Woodland is our own community, and that's where you make tweaks. But there's the legal piece, and then there's kind of what are other people doing and what's working and what's not working. But I completely agree with Anne that if this was not really a public process before, then I feel like there's some pretty significant education to do.
Yeah, so the last time when I did this, the only requirement was to have a public hearing, and we had only one public hearing. And although we had meetings in the council chambers, not many people attended. And I have been looking, Mary, at what different cities are doing. I've been in a couple of webinars, and I've been looking at what City of Pasadena, although it's a much bigger city, has been doing. And one of the ones I recently looked at was the City of Napa, and they actually have community workshops that are scheduled throughout different places in their city. They have one at like a middle school. They have one at a community gym center, an elementary school, a library, a Catholic church. And then I noticed that all of their public hearings are being held, I think it was Napa, in City Hall. Yeah, all their public hearings are being held in City Hall, but their community workshops are being held at different locations throughout the city. And so I was thinking of a couple of different locations throughout the city where you might want to hold workshops. And I thought of Woodland Community College, the Community Senior Center, City Hall, Woodland High School, Pioneer High School, elementary schools, the Woodland Library, Holy Rosary Community Center, the church over there by Fire Station 2. I'm not sure, it's the Christian Church. I was also thinking that one of the options that this commission has is to have a utility bill insert that would go out with our utility bill. And then you could do that in English and Spanish.
What would that, do we have an allocated budget of how much would that cost to insert that into the utility bill? Would it be in the Aquanet, the city's water utility?
Oh, the Aquahawk, you mean?
I apologize.
No, I don't know. I can find out how much that will cost. I don't have a dollar figure. The other thing the Chamber of Commerce has done for me when I'm recruiting for boards and commissions is they have an e-blast that goes out once a month. So I could have the Chamber of Commerce send something out. That way there's the Facebook, Instagram.
Yes, the city has its Facebook and Instagram, right? I don't want to miss out on that opportunity, especially nowadays. You get a lot of response on social media, especially with how quickly it is to take a vote on some things, and we can provide a link. But if we can figure out a way, again, going back to Mary's point, how long we want this outreach to go for, how much of a campaign, because we can have a campaign go a couple days a week. We can go on the weekends, but if we don't have an end date, it's just going to cause a lot of not measurable data. It's going to have a lot of incomplete, I feel. Peggy, you have sorry, I apologize, Anna. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that very quickly that the city of Napa is going to have their first community workshop in December. Then they're going to hold another one in January, mid-January, and then their last one looks like it's scheduled on Sunday, January 30th, and they're having two on that day, one in the morning for an hour and a half and one in the afternoon. And they will be holding their first public hearing in October, then December, January, February, and March. So they've actually scheduled 5 public hearings. So yeah, that is something to think about. Some dates maybe that you may want to talk about that we can get out there to the public. And then like Ethan said, information that we can provide at the workshops.
My understanding from when we talked last was that there's some pretty strict parameters on our dates, when we can start. We have to do something before the map is drafted, something afterwards, and so many days before the city council takes it under approval. So, it'd be really good to have kind of a sketch out of those level of dates, so then we could start tucking in the workshops, which I understand are a separate thing. Even if you're discussing it, the workshops would be separate from the required public hearings.
So as far as your role in the process, we can substitute the public workshops for the official public hearings. They're done by the committee prior to the draft map being recommended to the council. Then after that, there has to be public hearings that would be presided by presided over by the city council. But in terms of, that's the minimum requirement that we have the two either public workshops or public hearings before this body prior to the draft. But we can do more than that. So if we were going to have public hearings in addition to public workshops, that is an option. So it's kind of like that's the minimum bar, but then there's additional things that we can do. So and it's really up to the committee, but Anna, maybe what we could develop for the committee before the next meeting is kind of sketch out, provide some information on what other communities are doing in terms of, communities that are both local and of similar size to Woodland. So we're not, talking about the major metropolitan areas, but more people who are comparable to us and things that are being done locally. One of the issues that I think is a general issue in terms of getting information is that everyone is doing this right now at the same time because it's all dictated by the same process. So it's not like, in a lot of senses, we've actually done it more recently than a lot of other folks because we set up our districts prior to or after the last census data came out. So so it's not like we have necessarily a template that is exactly analogous to what we're doing right now. But Anna, maybe what we could do is provide examples locally for what people have, and then sketch out a schedule with a proposed number of workshops that we could have and public hearings, and then this body can provide us input on should we do more, should we do less, and then kind of a sketch of the materials that we would be providing to the public at the public workshops. And it looks like Mary made a comment. It would be helpful to have a draft structure to look at and use as a template. It's helpful to have something to start from. That's kind of what I was getting at, Mary, that we have kind of something for you to react to rather than just acting for kind of open-ended input on what the next step should be.
May I make a suggestion? Oh, sorry, Mary. Go ahead.
Go ahead, David. You're good?
No, please.
I was just thinking that our input is most likely the most impactful with really the community connection. It's not so much on when the public hearings are, and those are pretty set to a certain extent. Not a lot of differences there that we can react to, but where I think that's the point, right, of having an advisory committee that are people from the community, is to ensure that we have community connections that we can ensure that are connected to. So it seems to me it's really more on that side, like where are we, to your point, Anna, about which churches and community centers and all that. I mean, that would be also really interesting, is to start drafting a list, right? And we start drafting this list of like, okay, here's some options. Here's a list of 20, 50 options, whatever it is. And that is something we can react to and give a lot more feedback to, I believe, especially as they are around each district. And maybe, and potentially it's different nonprofit organizations that those of us potentially work with in the communities that we could say, here's one that we definitely want to make sure is included in this process. That kind of a thing to react to would be very helpful, I feel like, with the outreach piece.
Okay.
Because you started with a great list there, and those were a lot of the ones I was thinking of as well, but I'm sure all of us have some additional suggestions. So it could even be a Google Doc or something like that you sent out, and we could add to it.
Okay.
Between now and the next meeting, or we could, put a check mark next to it or a star or something like that for ones that we think are, it's almost a way to kind of give our voting input, so to speak, as to one of the most critical locations for those community meetings.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
And my suggestion was going to be if we can include this presentation slide onto whether it's the next agenda packet, or if you could forward that to us, please, Anna. I think there's a lot of good information here that goes with the formation of some kind of template structure for us to go with.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I have sort of a technical question for our map person. I'm wondering if the way the maps work would be something that people in the community could participate in by, inputting certain queries into the map, like where do the most elementary school age children live, or where are the foreign language speakers, or something along those lines, so that they would have the ability to input or just explore it before they put their line on the paper
Yes.
that they could turn in.
Yeah, that is the goal. Once we get that tabulated data back, we're going to be putting that up on the city's website for them to be able to see any of the criteria, be it, the voting age, the ethnicity, like I said, the school breakdown, any of that that's in that data file from the census. We will be putting that up on the city website for them to use, and they're not just drawing arbitrary lines and not, they're actually based on something tangible. So that is the goal for sure.
Would you be able to provide us with a list of those criteria, even though they're not filled in yet, but just to give us an idea of what kinds of criteria we'd be able to look at?
Yeah, I can see what all the data fields are in that, what is it called? The PL 94171 file. So I will see what everything that is included in just that data set of the census. So I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Can we get an updated number or population count on the 30th of this month, right? Do we have
yes, everything is supposed to be tabulated by then. Right now, the raw data has been released, but they're also going to be synthesizing the data and tabulating it to make it more accessible and can be used in like Excel and not in like a database format. So that's what's coming on the 30th. The raw data has been released, and it's very hard to work with in its format that has been released. It's more for the people who have the ability to use those database programs to start doing it themselves, just because at the state level, they have a lot more to go through than we do, and they probably have a lot more resources. So we are waiting on that. But
And what would be the date for posting that on the website after the 30th?
Probably not long after I get it. I'm hoping within a few days even of having it to get it up on the city website. It's not that difficult to get it up. It's just a matter of getting it and then kind of parsing it and make sure it makes sense and then pushing that out. So technically it's pretty easy. So from my side to share.
So we're a little bit over 2 weeks away from having a map on a city website.
I hope so. That is more I'm hoping for. Yes.
And so I think, we would all want to make sure that's sort of put into the context. So these other materials we're talking about in terms of explaining what that is and explaining the process, if not the dates and location, at least that there are going to be some form of public input, would be good to have at the same time, because I think the map would be confusing if people didn't have context.
I agree. And if you're going to be having workshops, I think that's definitely a key component to have the information available so they can make informed decisions about where they should go. So, yes.
I just have a couple thoughts on this map. And one of the things I thought of, which is getting used kind of everywhere these days, but it is really handy, is QR codes. So if there's ways, whether it's in the mailer that goes out, you literally can take your phone, use a QR code, and it could go directly to the website or even directly to the map. I think that would be super valuable for all ages as well. I could really see even, high school students getting pretty interested in civics class or whatever in the world they're teaching these days. I don't know what the requirements are. But something easy for people to access it, anybody. And then the other thing that I was wondering, Daniel, is would it be fairly simple to, once you do get those numbers, to show the change from what is it? What did you say? What year? 2013?
I would have to use the 2010 census data. You know what I mean? That's just what.
Okay, yeah, sure, 2010, because I think that would also be really interesting for people to see, well, okay, it's one thing to look at the numbers, but again, putting them in context. What is the change over a decade? And even if there's ways to show, and I'm sure there is, ways to show where those changes are from or around the city. I just think that that will be a part of this educational process.
Especially at least population growth at a minimum, but the other demographic components as well. So
as part of this educational piece, I think it would be helpful when they're looking at the map, and, side by side to 2010 to 2020, and then some of those summaries, some of the big things that have changed more than just the population change. That's nice, but where has the population changed in the city? I mean, again, I think we'll know where it is.
How.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely explore that for sure.
That'd be great.
So I've been just taking some notes on kind of what I understand to be the next steps that we as staff will kind of bring back to you at the next meeting. And so I'm just going to go through what I'm hearing, and then give me input and let me know if I'm missing anything. But what I was hearing is that you'd like, in order to kind of give us some direction, is examples of the processes that other communities are going through as part of this community outreach effort and redistricting at the kind of the committee level. A proposed schedule with locations for workshops and hearings that would be conducted by this group. Proposed outreach methods, examples being the mailers, social media outreach, and otherwise. And then kind of an outline of the types of materials that we would plan on providing at the workshops and hearings, and how we are thinking about actually collecting the community input that we would get. So that's what I have. Does that sum it up? And do folks have anything they want to add in terms of what they want to see at the next meeting?
I'd like to see if there's monies available for us to do, like the mail, utility bill mailer, or insert the printing of handouts or any of those type of things.
Sure. And I do think, as part of this, obviously, the more outreach you can do, the better, but it's always kind of tempered by, budgetary concerns and staffing concerns. So we're going to have to go back and talk to Ken about kind of, what is realistic from our standpoint, and kind of try to find that balance between, what we think is optimal level of outreach given our resources. So budgeting, thank you, Ann. That's a key point that we have to consider, and whatever we include, we'll take that into consideration.
Is there anything that we as commissioners can do to help staff, draft any materials, wordings, PowerPoints, or any of that? Or is that all something that the staff should be handling?
Well, I mean, I think at this point, probably what would be best is to have us kind of take that role, and you can provide input and feedback on the materials. It may be at a later point that we want, you to take a more active role in that. But I think probably at this point, the most efficient way is for us to kind of take the lead on that, at least initially.
Thank you.
So back to that survey. One thing that we do a lot of is surveys with the Center for Land-Based Learning, and some easy things to do, going back to QR codes, is a QR code that goes directly to a survey link, a Google form or SurveyMonkey, depending, or something else that the city uses. That would be fairly, not a lot of questions, short. Again, the goal here is to get feedback. So if you have a survey that's really long and it's going to take a while for someone to go through and do, we're not going to get anything. So I think that it would be, some people will do that, but I think it would be really, one thing to think about is some different kinds of survey methods some that are the longer that maybe we could elicit more feedback depending upon the audience, and others that could be 3 to 4 questions. So just another thought there with regards to using some different kinds of ways to gather input from different audiences. And again, and we have to think about obviously what kinds of input we'd want, but that would be another thing that I don't know if there's somebody, I'm sure there is at the city who's kind of, this is their specialty. But that might be another person to have on a future meeting, is someone to help talk about the different opportunities that we might have, again, for low cost. And I completely understand the staffing situation. Depending on the type of surveys, SurveyMonkey, Google form you use, luckily they kind of do all the math for you. So less open, especially if there's not a lot of open-ended questions. But that, could be very, very helpful for this committee to be able to look at as we go forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those are all great suggestions. And Anna and I, we do have someone on staff who I think would be helpful in that. So I'll circle back with Anna and Ken about potentially bringing him in to help out.
And I was kind of joking about the civics class, but I'm also kind of not. Like, it would be cool to engage high school students in this process. We work with high school students, so I think about this, how to engage them in their community. And if there was some way that all of the teachers around Woodland, that Woodland High and Pioneer and Christian, Woodland Christian School and Holy Rosary, there can't be that many teachers that teach this kind of curriculum. And maybe it would be an interesting way to gather some additional input, especially around the community interests, is also from the high school students. So, because that's the future as well in terms of who lives here. And we want them to be engaged in our community and these processes. And if it just seems like this really imposing thing that isn't interesting, and why would they get involved? We're just setting up for future failure within the city with regards to these kinds of input. So, maybe there's a way to bring some of these teachers together and think about some creative ways to get their classes involved, even if it's just 2 or 3 classes throughout the city.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea very, very much. There are future community members and decision makers here, and
many of them will be voting soon too. Like if we're we have classes of seniors or whatever it is, right? It's another way of engaging them in the democratic process.
Maybe also, Mary, when you said high school students, I was thinking of the teen library.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, Woodland Community College is in that vein as well. There might be some classes there, some instructors that would be interested in engaging in this as well.
That the teens are doing in November the Adulting 101. And they're still putting together proposals and looking for people to do presentations. I think it's November 13th. If we could do a workshop on that. And actually, we just spoke to Robert Egger, who is DC Central. He is the keynote speaker for Adulting 101. He is donating his time to speak to the teens.
Mm-hmm. He's awesome. He is so incredibly motivating. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's a really good friend of mine. So.
Yeah, he's wonderful. That's great, Anne. That's a great idea. That's exactly what this is. Adulting 101. And here we are. We're adulting. Yay!
I know I've shared that flyer with a few of my neighbors who have teenage children. Teenagers, not children, teenagers, yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there a way for the city, does the city have a draft of kind of proposed events that they're having anytime soon? They're having to celebrate Woodland 150th anniversary. They're having this Adult 101. Maybe that's something, I don't want to take away too much focus, but that'd be some something interesting to include with our proposed schedule with locations.
I'm thinking we have a communications manager. His name is Spencer Bowen, whom
Yeah.
information, might be in the loop on everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think it's October 16th is the celebration for Woodland's 150th. And again, a really easy way if people are coming out anyway. Click on the QR code, answer 3 to 4 questions. Thanks very much. You're a part of this process. We really appreciate it. Keep it simple and easy. And also not a lot of paper that people then have to like take back and somebody do something with it. So yeah.
Oh, so David, if this commission is interested, I'm happy to put in a proposal for the Adulting 101 to do a workshop on redistricting, what that means and how they can become involved.
I think that's a great option and a workshop proposal that we can include there. But I like the idea of looping in Spencer. And I've worked with him before. I think that he can give us a better understanding as to what outreach the city's already doing with communication on other projects that can help us better strategize, an impact here. Robert, do you have a question?
No, I don't. I'm intently listening tonight. Believe it or not, I've already been asked to do a little presentation on what we are in a couple 3 weeks. And I said, well, yeah, no, really, to League of Women Voters. And I said, well, maybe we should wait until we've had at least 2 meetings here.
You got it, Bob.
Oh yeah. No,
well,
but,
that's a good point. There's Rotaries, there's all kinds of other.
Yeah,
groups.
there's all kinds of groups that we'll get input.
Mm-hmm.
People have to know that this group exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we've had some publications in the paper, but I also think that not enough people read the Democrat anymore. And I mean, it's just a fact out there. But anyway, so I'll let you know when and how my presentation goes. And I want to, and the feedback I get from these radical women, and they're not
radical women.
Yeah, radical women. I'm kidding, obviously, because my wife is one.
That's right. That's right. That's great. No, but that is true. I mean, there's lots of service clubs. There's lots of, of all sizes and types. And that's another, again, I don't know if Woodland the city has a list of those somewhere, but that would be interesting too. You talked about the chamber, Anna, and of course that's a great one. I know that the city of Sacramento and stuff like that has the Hispanic chamber and the Asian Pacific chamber and the African American chamber. And there might be, some of those groups might have some additional kind of Woodland contacts that we could be taking a look at. I know there's others, obviously Latino and Hispanic groups that we can certainly work with. And I'm sure and others as well. I mean, again, I don't want to ignore. I mean, my dad's he's been talking and meeting with this group of like Nepali immigrants that are here, and there's like 50 of them that he's been talking to. And I mean, so it's just amazing how, and I don't know where they live exactly, but these are the kinds of things that I don't know, just are super interesting to me about how do we gather that information? Because I don't feel like I don't know. We'll see, I guess, when the maps come out, but whether or not that's on the map, I'm not sure.
Yeah, to your point, Mary, I sort of feel like part of the outreach should be, that we are sensitive to the fact that this is all kind of, legal and statutory and structural. And so like community of interest, that sounds really sterile to me.
It does.
What we would say is, what's your neighborhood? You know,
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
your friends? Who's your, who do you rely on? What are you doing? What's your source of income?
Right.
Kind of more in that regard would induce people to talk. I think even though I like the survey or questionnaire, I guess it is, or comment, comment paper that Anna did, and it's definitely accurate as to what we're supposed to be doing. I'm thinking a lot of people, it just won't really connect with them.
No. We have a hard enough time getting people to respond to surveys as it is.
Can we loop Spencer Bowen? He's the communications manager, right?
Yes.
Can we loop him in to talk to us about what he sees on some of the surveys that the city's already thrown out there, and maybe he can suggest us some approach as well. That'd be great.
Well, and I also feel like, this is an opportunity to maybe gather more data that we need for other things within the city, right? So thinking, yes, we have a statute, we have a legal requirement that what we have to do. But if there's ways that this can help benefit other things, I think we need to be thinking about that as well. And the more that you connect and interconnect with other needs of the community, I just feel like the results are going to be stronger. So, sorry for the yapping dog in the background.
I'm used to it. I got a crying pit bull over here. Do we establish our next meeting date? Does it have to be a standing meeting date? I know this was kind of last minute agreement when we were available, but Anna, do you have some guidance on that?
I think you indicated that Mondays worked. And for now, I think you mentioned something about meeting once or twice a month, but or I remember Ken saying something about maybe in the beginning you want to meet more than once or twice a month. Is that what you remember, Ethan?
Yeah, and I think it would probably, at this point, especially since we're still trying to get a game plan going, it would be a good idea to meet sooner rather than later. Until we have kind of a sketched out schedule of what we're going to do.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the calendar, today's Monday, the 13th. The next Monday is the 20th. The Monday after that is the 27th, which is very close to the 30th, which is very close to a couple days after the 30th when Daniel will be posting the map. And that's what I'm kind of looking at as like we should be aiming towards that. And in order to get the information that Ethan had kind of outlined from our discussion, I think we better meet next week on the 20th and sort of have a start on that work so that we're ready to complete it on the 27th or close thereafter.
Thank you. Does that give staff enough time to gather the information and move from the suggestions that we had here today? I want to make sure, y'all have enough time on top of all the other responsibilities you have.
Yeah.
What do you think, Anna?
I don't know. I'm not going to be here Friday. I'm taking my daughter to move down south. She's going to be starting school over there. So
maybe we could tentatively put it down and Anna, I think one of the things we've asked is to get some additional folks to come in. So maybe as long as we can get that would be a critical next step.
Okay. I'm just concerned that I may not have time because I'm also going to be working on the council agenda that goes for next Tuesday.
Okay.
And can I ask the members here today, how do you feel about swaying away from a Monday, giving Anna enough time another day in that week, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, I wouldn't, it wouldn't bother me one little bit.
Robert's good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be likely gone next week for part of the week, going down to Salinas. So it would be difficult, but I would be doing it from, I could probably do it.
I can
Monday
do it.
works, but
I would have a tough time. I have board meetings Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the next week.
yeah. Well, should we set the 27th for sure? And Monday, the 20th is maybe a tentative or something. I do like the momentum piece of shorter meetings, and because honestly, I've had a long day already. So it's one of those, I'd kind of like to go make dinner now. So, just the pieces of just kind of keeping the momentum going. So they don't have to be super long meetings, but maybe it's shorter and getting some good info, and then being able to give you guys what you need to move forward.
I think looking at whatever Anna can and Ethan can do between now and the end of the week is what we can look at, and just as Mary said, just kind of keep things moving.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, this is Ken finally chiming in here. I think I like Mary's suggestion that let's try to keep a pretty consistent cadence here for the next few weeks until we get real grounded on a game plan. And I think by next Monday, we should be able to put together a very good, thoughtful sort of process of all the different meeting points that we want to get out there in front of the community just for you guys to react to, and then hopefully walk out of that meeting just with that settled on here's the approach of the outreach opportunities we want to go after. The next meeting, maybe on the 27th, we can then dive into what are those materials that we need for each one of those workshop, public hearing, survey pieces. Spend a little bit more time preparing to have that for you guys to look at. But by next Monday, we should be able to have a pretty good sense of what a schedule looks like to keep us on task, but at the same time, do some meaningful sort of public outreach throughout the community. So let's throw that out there for discussion.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
That works with me. As long as
I would like, as soon as Danny's got his maps, uploaded and whatnot, I'd also like to have kind of a tutorial session with this group on how these maps work, so you guys can understand the mechanics of how the census data gets manipulated as these lines gets drawn. Because in my dream, I see some of these outreach opportunities as workshops where people can come in and they can actually interact with the map live in the workshop. And Danny and others hopefully can sort of help them through how their decision points on where to draw lines affect the outputs and whatnot. So it can be helpful for all of us to understand how that tool works, so that we can help communicate to the public. So maybe after the 30th data is released, we can schedule just a 45-minute session with this group just to have Danny walk us through that.
Great.
Sound good?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
All right, so we shoot for 20th, 6 o'clock.
Yep.
We'll focus on schedule and outreach.
we can just say that, right? There's no motion needed for that.
No.
Okay. Perfect.
No, you don't need this.
Okay. Does staff have everything that they need from us for next week?
I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll get that dinner made, Mary.
Yeah, I know. I'm like hungry.
What are we having?
Tuna steaks.
Oh,
David, do we need a motion to adjourn?
Probably. So moved.
May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Just
I move to adjourn.
Peggy, you motion.
I'll second it.
Bob seconds that motion. All those in favor?
Aye. Oh, I guess we have to do the. We're all in a.
Yeah, I think we're okay. We're going to
We're
let that
okay
one
on
go.
adjournment?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.